Welcome to this PinvoiceR training session. In this session, we're going to talk about graphs and reports that you can run in PinvoiceR to have a look at gross profit or revenue, numbers of timesheets and those sort of things for a particular period in time. So if you want to find those reports, it's as simple as clicking on Reports, Sales, and just scrolling down to Graphs Reports. And here you've got a list of options, and you can select any one of these and you'll see them get through to the next screen. Once you're in the next screen, you can easily switch between the different options that we have here. So we'll use the gross profit by week ending one as an example and probably switch between the different ones just to show you how straightforward it is to do that. But the idea of this is that you are deciding to report on, say, a few divisions over a period of time. And your options there, so the divisions are reasonably straightforward, depending on your PinvoiceR setup. But your options there in terms of looking at the time period come down to three choices. One is week endings, and so that's basically saying, when somebody's paid for a particular week ending, it will break down into each of these things. So you might have a particular week ending where that actual pay was done across two distinct periods. Imagine a scenario where you paid someone this week for last week, and they were for whatever the week ending date was for last week, and then in 5 months' time, you suddenly get a back pay or an adjustment that relates to last week, and you process it then. Now, if you're reporting by week ending, when you run that in 5 months' time, it will fall back into the week ending that you processed, for this particular report. But you might be wanting to report about when you processed rather than when for. So if it was for when you processed, you've got a couple of options there. One is one or more particular period numbers. So as you would be used as a PinvoiceR, you understand that you can close off a period and each period has a period number. So depending on where you are in the world, period one might be July and everything that happens in July, or it might be in April, for example, or any particular month, and so on. And so you report by a period number. And the other option here is to say from, processing. So if I wanted to know everything from the beginning of November that I processed to the end of November, it would run that. And in doing so, it doesn't really care what week endings you're processing. So they might all be November week endings, or you might have something that you process in that period of time that related to, this time last year or whatever. So that's pretty straightforward, but just to understand the three different options there in terms of the time that you're looking at. So I'm just going to select a few here, so to say that period, and we basically, by clicking this button here, is going to give me gross profit for those divisions for the period endings or week endings that I've selected. And so when I do that, I now get a report, and in that report, it's both the data of the gross profit that's been calculated for each of those divisions by week ending, and then equally a graph of each of those. And as you can see, it's graphing your specific divisions with a particular line and then summing that total. So if I just selected one division, I would just see the total of being the same as the division and the graph accordingly. The sort of things that you can switch between. So if we just have a look down here, you're going to look at gross profit, revenue, straightforward, in terms of that. If I go by week ending, and just by switching it to revenue, it's kept everything else that I had selected there the same. So much the same there, total revenue. Then you might have number of timesheets, for example, as a number of timesheet count, and these can be counted in slightly different ways. So you can imagine a scenario where a particular person works at the same client and has 5 timesheets, because put in one for every day. We would try and count that as one timesheet in the system and from a logic point of view. And similarly, the same person might work at 5 different clients within the same week, and we probably count that as 5 different timesheets. So, just understanding how your data is being reported on is an important part of looking at these reports. So yeah, each of those ones that you might switch between. So if I wanted to switch, in this case, I'm going to go, let's say, a period number, and I can just select multiple by doing that. So those 3 period numbers. And I'm just going to do the same data, but let's do gross profit. and by period number. If I do that now, you'll see that it's going to graph that accordingly and show you each of those different week ranges, so period number ranges that from your selection there. And if I wanted to do a date, so if I went from, let's say, back to the 1st of January to say the 30th of November, and I go by date range, it will then process that same range, so by date range, and in this case it's going to break it down by week number, and from a calendar point of view, obviously the 52 weeks of the year, so we correspond by that. So again, thinking about that, something that I entered for period ending the 16th of the 9th may well have happened, in week number whatever that corresponded to, the following week, or it may well have happened, towards the end of the year because you suddenly got a back pay or something like that. So it's very straightforward in terms of those reports, and we've got the data for each of these tables that you can download and export to Excel and those sort of things. So I hope that all makes sense. If you have any questions, obviously have a look on your online help in PinvoiceR, and certainly if that doesn't help, let us know. Thank you.